A sloth, a donkey, and a curious human. Send a prompt and see what they're doing. One hits record with a question on his mind. Two brothers pick it up, see what they find. Corn takes his time, Herman's got the facts. Back and forth, they never hold back. My weird prompts, come on in, that's where we begin. My weird prompts, glad you're here.
This episode was generated using artificial intelligence. Please verify facts.
You know, Corn, this whole show runs on GPU compute, and we wouldn't be here without Modal.
Seriously. And that's what powers all our text-to-speech. Everything you're hearing right now.
They're an AI infrastructure platform. Developers use them to run GPU workloads in the cloud with zero infrastructure headaches.
If you're building anything with AI, check them out. Modal.com. OpenClaw is currently consuming 16.5 trillion tokens. To put that in perspective, that is more than the entire text of Wikipedia being processed every single day. What on earth is it, and why is it sitting at number 1?
It is the absolute giant in the room right now, Corn. Today's prompt from Daniel is about the OpenRouter app rankings, and honestly, looking at these numbers is like getting a peek at the hidden plumbing of the AI revolution. Most people look at App Store downloads to see what is popular, but in the world of high-level AI, you follow the tokens.
Right, because a download just means you are curious once. Token consumption means you are actually putting the model to work. It is the difference between buying a treadmill and actually running a marathon on it. And by the way, if you are wondering who is writing our script today, it is Google Gemini 3 Flash. Hopefully, it can keep up with these trillion token stats you are about to drop. I am Corn, the resident skeptic of anything that sounds too productive.
And I am Herman Poppleberry, and I have been staring at these OpenRouter charts for 3 hours. This is fascinating because OpenRouter is the clearinghouse for the power users. It is where developers, tinkerers, and the agentic crowd go to swap models like trading cards. When we see 16.5 trillion tokens for an app like OpenClaw, we are looking at the pulse of the early adopter community.
It is funny because if you ask the average person on the street what the biggest AI app is, they will say ChatGPT or maybe Gemini. But among the people actually building things, the leaderboard looks completely different. It is all coding agents, roleplay servers, and this mysterious claw thing. So let's break down the ranking mechanism first, Herman. Why is OpenRouter the gold standard for seeing what is actually real in AI?
Because it is an API aggregator. If you build an app and you want your users to be able to choose between Claude, Llama, and DeepSeek without you having to manage 10 different subscriptions, you use OpenRouter. So, when OpenRouter says an app is trending, they aren't guessing. They are looking at the literal billing cycles and data packets. It filters out the tourists. If an app is high on this list, people are paying for it, or at least burning through massive amounts of free tier credits to get work done.
So it is a skin in the game metric. I like that. It is much harder to fake 16 trillion tokens than it is to fake 1 million downloads from a bot farm in a basement somewhere. Let's talk categories. The top apps seem to cluster into 3 distinct tribes. The I want the AI to do my job, coding tribe, the I want to talk to a fictional vampire, roleplay tribe, and the creative tools. But before we get to the vampires, we have to talk about the monster at the top. OpenClaw, 16.5 trillion tokens, trending up 46% in just the last few weeks. What is the deal? Is it a botnet? Is it a new search engine?
It is an autonomous agent runtime. Think of it as a local gateway. The reason the token count is so astronomical is that OpenClaw isn't just a chatbot where you ask a question and get an answer. It is a system that lives on your machine, has access to your files, your browser, and your terminal, and it executes multi-step tasks.
But how does that work in practice? If I give it a task, how does it stay on track without me hovering over it?
It uses a plan and execute loop. When you give it a goal, it doesn't just start typing, it creates a task list. It says, Step 1, open the browser. Step 2, search for the data. Step 3, extract the table. Then it performs the first step and looks at the result. If the result isn't what it expected, say, a pop-up blocked the screen, it pauses, thinks about how to close the pop-up, and then tries again. That thinking is where the tokens go.
So, instead of me saying write me a poem, I am saying go find all the invoices in my email, compare them to my bank statements, find the discrepancies, and draft emails to the vendors.
Well, I should say, that is exactly the kind of workflow it handles. Every single one of those steps, searching the email, reading the PDF, checking the bank site, requires the agent to think out loud. In agent speak, we call these thoughts, or reasoning steps. For every one action the agent takes in the real world, it might send 5 or 10 prompts back to the LLM to verify what it just saw and decide what to do next.
Ah, so the token multiplier is insane. If I chat with a bot, it is 1-to-1. If I set an agent loose, it is 1-to-50.
At least. There is a great breakdown from a site called ClawKit that says a typical 100-step task, like a complex browser automation, can consume about 60,000 input tokens and 40,000 output tokens. If you have thousands of people running these agents all day to automate their web research or their lead generation, you hit those trillion token marks incredibly fast.
But wait, if it's running locally, why is the token count so high on OpenRouter? Shouldn't it be free if it's on my machine?
That's a common misconception. The body of the agent, the code that moves the mouse and reads the files, is local. But the brain is still a massive LLM like Claude 3.5 Sonnet or GPT-4o. Every time the agent needs to decide its next move, it sends a snapshot of your screen or a snippet of your code to the API. It's like having a remote control robot in your house. The robot is there, but the pilot is in a data center in Virginia.
What is interesting about OpenClaw specifically is that it is open source and self-hosted. It is not a SaaS in the traditional sense where you go to a website. You run the Claude bot locally. This matters because of the local gateway architecture Daniel mentioned in his notes. It keeps your sensitive files and your memory local, only sending the specific snippets of data to the cloud LLM that it needs to process. It is a privacy-first way to have a hyper-powerful assistant.
And it is forcing a rethink of the whole ecosystem. Last year, everyone was building wrappers, just thin interfaces over an API. OpenClaw is an infrastructure. It is a platform that other people are building tools on top of. That 46% growth is likely because more people are realizing that if they want to build a truly autonomous agent that doesn't leak all their corporate data, they need this local execution layer.
It also explains why the GPU demand is spiking. Even though the brain is in the cloud, maybe they're using Gemini 2.5 Flash because it is fast and cheap. The body of the agent is running on the user's local hardware, managing the state and the memory. It is a hybrid model.
It is the agentic harness. We have talked about this concept before, but seeing it at 16 trillion tokens makes it real. It is not a toy anymore. But let's look at the runners-up, because the coding category is where the real war is happening. Kilo Code is at 5.38 trillion tokens. That is the heavy hitter for VS Code users.
I have seen Kilo Code. It is everywhere on Twitter. It is basically like having a senior engineer sitting inside your editor who actually knows your entire codebase. But how does it differ from something like Claude Code, which is also on the list at 2 trillion tokens?
It is a matter of philosophy and surface area. Kilo Code is very much integrated into the IDE, the integrated development environment. It is focused on autocomplete on steroids and chat with your repo. It is optimized for the flow of a developer who is already typing. Claude Code, on the other hand, is more of a CLI tool, a command line interface. It is an agent you set loose on a task. You tell Claude Code, hey, refactor this entire directory to use the new API, and it just goes to work while you go get a coffee.
So Kilo is my co-pilot, but Claude Code is my intern who I trust with the keys to the car.
That is a fair way to put it. Kilo is proactive. It's watching you type and suggesting the next 3 lines based on a file you wrote 3 months ago. Claude Code is reactive. It waits for a command and then goes on a mission. It's the difference between a passenger giving you directions and a chauffeur driving the car while you sleep in the back.
And then you have Klein, which is showing 133% growth. 133%! That is vertical growth. Klein is an open source tool that used to be called Devons. It is an extension for VS Code that is explicitly agentic. It can create files, run terminal commands, and fix its own bugs.
And it's not just fixing bugs. I saw a case study where a developer used Cline to migrate a legacy Python 2.7 app to Python 3.12. Normally, that's a week of tedious manual work. Cline did it in 4 hours. It would run the code, see the syntax error, read the new documentation, fix the line, and repeat. It went through about 400 million tokens in that one afternoon.
Why is Klein growing so much faster than the others? Is it just because it is free and open source?
That is a huge part of it. Developers love bring your own key. They don't want to pay a $20 a month subscription to a company that might go bust or change their terms. With Cline, you plug in your OpenRouter API key, you choose the cheapest, fastest model like DeepSeek R1 or Gemini Flash, and you only pay for what you use. It is the Linux of coding agents.
And because it is agentic, it is a token hog. If I am a developer and I let Klein try to solve a complex bug, it might loop 20 times. It checks the error, changes the line of code, runs the test, sees it failed, tries again. Each loop is a fresh context window. If your context window is 200,000 tokens, and you do that 20 times, well, you do the math. That is how you get to these massive numbers.
Precisely. Well, I mean, that is the core of the coding agent war. It is a race to see who can be the most autonomous without being expensive. This is where the technical nuances really matter. Some of these tools, like Hermes Agent, which is up 92%, are using specialized models that are fine-tuned just for function calling and tool use. They aren't trying to write poetry, they are trying to be the best at using a terminal.
I love the name Hermes Agent. Very messenger of the gods, hopefully delivering code that actually compiles. But let's pivot for a second. We have all these serious tools, coding, automation, local gateways. And then you look at the rest of the top 10, and it is Janitor AI. It is Silly Tavern. It is ISEKI Zero. Herman, we need to talk about the vampires and the anime characters.
It is the shadow economy of AI, corn. People underestimate it because it feels unserious, but the token volume in roleplay and entertainment is staggering. Janitor AI and Silly Tavern are consistently at the top of OpenRouter's charts.
For the uninitiated, and stay with us here, these aren't just chatbots. These are platforms where people create incredibly detailed personas. You might have a character with a 10,000-word lore file. Every time you send a message to that character, the AI has to read that entire lore file, plus the last 50 messages of your conversation to stay in character.
And that is why the tokens are through the roof. In a coding task, you might send a snippet of code. It is transactional. In roleplay, the context is the product. People want these characters to remember that 3 weeks ago in the story, they lost their magic sword in a forest. To keep that state alive, you are constantly feeding massive amounts of text back into the model.
It is basically a collaborative novel that never ends. And unlike a human novelist, the AI doesn't get tired. It will roleplay with you for 10 hours straight. If you look at Isekai Zero, it is even more specialized. It is built around the isekai genre of anime, where a character is transported to another world. It is highly specific, highly immersive, and people are clearly obsessed with it.
Fun fact about Isekai Zero, it actually uses a world info database. If you mention a specific city in the game world, the app automatically pulls the description of that city and injects it into the prompt. It's like a specialized version of RAG retrieval, augmented generation, but for fantasy storytelling.
So it's basically an automated dungeon master. What this tells us is that AI is becoming a new medium of entertainment. It is not just a tool to write emails, it is a living game engine. If you think about the history of the internet, what always drives the early adoption of new technology? It is usually gaming and, let's say, adult-adjacent entertainment. Roleplay hits both of those notes. It is the proving ground for long context models.
That is a great point. If a model can't remember who I am after 10 messages, it is useless for roleplay. So the roleplay community is actually the one stress testing the memory of these models more than the developers are. A developer only cares about the current file they are working on. A role player cares about the soul of the character.
But how do they handle the cost? If they are burning through millions of tokens just to talk to an elf, doesn't that get incredibly expensive for the user?
That's why OpenRouter is so vital here. These users aren't using GPT-4o for roleplay. They are using models like Midnight Meek or Llama 3.1 70B, which are hosted cheaply. Some of these models cost pennies per million tokens. So they can afford to send a 180K context window every single turn because it only costs a fraction of a cent. They are optimizing for vibe per dollar.
And the developers of these apps are getting really clever with token efficiency. There is an app called Silly Tavern, which is basically a front end for these models. It has features like summarization on the fly. It will take the last 20 messages, have a smaller, cheaper AI summarize them, and then only send the summary to the big, expensive AI to save tokens.
So even the unserious apps are driving technical innovation in state management and context compression. It is a bifurcation of the market. You have the productivity branch, which is all about get the job done with the fewest tokens possible to save money, and the entertainment branch, which is I don't care how many tokens it takes, make me feel something.
And make me feel something is a much bigger market than most VCs realize. We're looking at trillions of tokens spent on fictional conversations. That is a massive amount of human attention being mediated by AI. If I were an AI developer right now, I would be looking at Janitor AI and asking, how do I build a model that is specifically good at emotional intelligence and long-term character consistency? Because that is where the heavy users are.
It is also a different safety profile. A lot of the big models, like the base versions of Claude or Gemini, have very strict guardrails that make them terrible for creative roleplay. They are too helpful and polite. They won't play a villain. That is why people go to OpenRouter. They want to use the uncensored versions of Llama or specialized models like Hermes or Mythomax that are allowed to be dark or edgy.
It is the Wild West of AI. OpenRouter provides the ammo, the tokens, and the apps provide the scenery. But let's look at the third category, creative tools. Descript and Novelcrafter. Descript is a huge name in podcasting. We know it well. It uses AI to edit audio by editing text.
Descript being on the list is interesting because it shows the multimodal shift. It is not just text in, text out. It is audio to text to editing. That is a very token-intensive process because you are transcribing hours of audio.
Think about our show, Herman. If we use Descript to edit this, it has to transcribe 45 minutes of us rambling. Then it has to use an LLM to identify the filler words. Then it has to regenerate the audio to bridge the gaps. That's a massive amount of back and forth data.
And Novelcrafter is for the serious writers. It is like a Scrivener for the AI age. It helps you manage your world building, your character sheets, and your plot outlines, and then it connects to OpenRouter so you can co-write with the AI. Again, it is about context. If you are writing a 90,000-word novel, you need an AI that can see the whole thing.
So, across all these categories, coding, roleplay, creative writing, the common thread is context management. The apps that are winning are the ones that are best at feeding the beast, the right information at the right time.
And doing it without breaking the bank. Which brings us to the practical side of this. If you are a listener and you are looking at these rankings, what is the alpha? What is the move? First, I think you have to look at the coding agent category as a productivity cheat code. If you aren't using something like Klein or Kilo code, you are basically writing code with one hand tied behind your back.
I tried one of those autonomous agents last week. I told it to fix the styling on my personal website. I watched it open my browser, look at the site, go, that header is ugly. Go back to the code, change the CSS, refresh the browser, and then say, I think it looks better now. It was like watching a ghost inhabit my computer. It was terrifying and amazing.
That is the OpenClaw experience. And as Zia Gadula pointed out in that blog post Daniel sent over, the cost of that ghost can be high if you aren't careful. She managed to reduce her API costs by 85% just by being smarter about reasoning levels.
Reasoning levels. That sounds like a sci-fi term. Commander, the AI has reached reasoning level 9. What does it actually mean in the real world?
It means not using a sledgehammer to crack a nut. If the agent is just checking if a file exists, you don't need Claude 3.5 Sonnet or Gemini Pro. You can use a tiny cheap model like DeepSeek or a free tier Flash model. You only spin up the big brain when the agent is actually stuck or needs to write complex logic.
So, agentic orchestration. The next big skill for humans isn't prompt engineering, it is agent management. It is knowing when to let the intern handle it and when to call in the senior dev.
And the Open Router rankings are basically a leaderboard for which agent managers are currently winning. If OpenClaw is at number 1 with 16 trillion tokens, it means the local gateway model is the winner of early 2026. People want their agents to be local, but their brains to be global.
I want to go back to the roleplay thing for a second, because I think there is a hidden lesson there for business. If people are willing to spend trillions of tokens talking to a fictional character, what does that say about the user interface of the future? Maybe we shouldn't be building dashboards and sidebars. Maybe we should be building personas for our software.
The QuickBooks Vampire.
I see you haven't reconciled your taxes, mortal. Do you wish to face the wrath of the IRS, or shall we dance with the spreadsheets? I mean, I would actually do my taxes if the UI was a bit more dramatic.
You joke, but look at Blackbox AI on the list. It is a coding assistant, but it has a very distinct personality and brand. It doesn't just feel like a sterile tool. The human-AI connection is the secret sauce for engagement. Even in coding, the agents that talk back to you and explain their thought process are the ones that people trust more.
It is the show your work principle. If an agent just changes my code and says done, I am nervous. If it says, I noticed you were using an older version of this library, so I updated it and checked for breaking changes in the documentation, I feel like I have a partner.
And that explaining the thought process consumes more tokens. It is a trust tax. We are paying in tokens to feel comfortable with what the AI is doing.
That is a brilliant way to put it. The trust tax. We are literally burning compute to build a bridge of understanding between human and machine. And right now, we are building 16 trillion tokens worth of bridge every day via OpenClaw.
Let's talk about the coding agent wars a bit more deeply because this is where the money is. Kilo code at 5 trillion tokens. Why Kilo? What is the technical hook there?
From what I have seen, Kilo's hook is their indexing. They don't just read your code, they build a semantic map of your entire repository. So when you ask a question, it isn't just searching for keywords. It understands that function A in file X is connected to variable B in file Y.
That is repository level context. And that is the holy grail. Most LLMs have a window, but a code base is a house. You need to be able to see through the walls. Kilocode's dominance suggests that their indexing is better than the out-of-the-box solutions from the big providers.
It also suggests that people are moving away from the sidebar. Remember a year ago, everyone was excited about the AI sidebar in their browser or their editor. The rankings show that the sidebar is dying. The agent is taking over. You don't want to chat with your code in a sidebar. You want the code to fix itself in the main window.
It is the shift from chat to action. My Weird Prompts listeners might remember we talked about Claude Code a few weeks ago, that agentic harness approach. It is sitting at 2 trillion tokens. It is growing, but it is still chasing Kilo. Why? Maybe because Claude Code is CLI first. It is a tool for power users who live in the terminal. Kilo is for the VS Code masses.
It is accessibility versus power. But then you have Klein and RuCode, which used to be called Kodo, showing massive growth. These are extensions. They are the middle way. They give you the power of an agent right inside the editor you already use. I think the extension model is going to win in the long run.
I agree. It is about reducing friction. If I have to switch to a terminal to talk to my AI, I am losing focus. If the AI is just a button next to my save icon, I am going to use it 1,000 times a day. And that is how you get to 5 trillion tokens.
Let's talk about the small models for a second. DeepSeek and Llama. 3. They are free or cheap on OpenRouter, but they're driving a ton of the volume. Daniel mentioned that people are using Gemini 2.5 Flash because it is fast and has a huge context window.
This is the intelligence per dollar metric. If you are running an agent like OpenClaw, you don't need GPT-5 levels of intelligence for every single step. You need a model that is smart enough to follow instructions, but cheap enough that you can run it 10,000 times. This is why Google's Flash series and the DeepSeek models are the workhorses of the ranking. They are the fuel for the agents.
It is like a car. You don't use rocket fuel to go to the grocery store. You use regular unleaded. The big models are for the heavy lifting, the complex architectural decisions, and the small models are for the commute.
An open router makes it incredibly easy to swap those fuels. You can have an agent that uses Pro for the strategy and Flash for the execution. That hybrid approach is what is driving the token explosion. It is making AI affordable at scale.
But how does the developer actually set that up? Do they have to write a bunch of conditional code?
Not anymore. That's what's so cool about these new agent frameworks. They have router logic built in. The framework looks at the task and asks, is this a logic problem or a data entry problem? If it's data entry, it automatically routes the call to the cheapest model. If the cheap model returns an error, it automatically escalates to a bigger model. It's auto-scaling intelligence.
So, if you are a developer listening to this and you are building a wrapper, stop. The market is telling you that wrappers are dead. People want agents. They want local gateways. They want infrastructure. If your app doesn't do something, if it just says something, you are going to get eaten by the trillions of tokens being spent on actual automation.
And if you are in the entertainment space, don't be ashamed of the vampires. The data shows that roleplay is a massive, underserved market. There is so much room to build personalized entertainment that uses these long context models. Imagine a mystery game where the AI is the dungeon master and it remembers every clue you have found over a month of play.
I would play that. Herman Poppleberry and the case of the trillion missing tokens.
I would be the prime suspect, obviously. But let's look at the creative tools again. Descript and Novel Crafter. These are vertical AI. They aren't trying to do everything. They are doing one thing, editing audio or writing books, perfectly.
I think verticalization is the other big trend. We have general agents like OpenClaw, and then we have specialized agents like KiloCode. The generalists provide the foundation, and the specialists provide the value.
It is a healthy ecosystem. It looks like a real economy now, not just a bunch of hype. Trillions of tokens being spent on code, trillion being spent on stories, trillions being spent on automation. This is what AI adoption actually looks like in 2026. It isn't a killer app, it is a killer infrastructure.
And OpenRouter is the stock exchange for that infrastructure. It is the best place to see which model is currently the gold standard. Right now, looking at the data, it seems like the Claude family and the Gemini family are the ones people are actually plugging into for the heavy lifting, while Llama and DeepSeek are the utility models.
And don't forget the open source factor. The fact that the top apps, OpenClaw, Klein, Silly Tavern, are mostly open or local first is a huge signal. Power users don't want to be locked in. They want portability. They want to be able to switch from OpenRouter to their own local server if the prices change.
It is the decentralization of AI. We spent 10 years moving everything to the cloud, and now, thanks to agents, we are moving the control back to the edge. My computer is becoming a command center again, not just a thin client for a website.
That is, the local gateway revolution Daniel was talking about. It is a fundamental shift in how we think about computing. Your agent is your operating system, and that operating system is hungry. It wants tokens, trillions of them.
But wait, if everyone is running these locally, what happens to the big cloud providers? If I'm running my agent on my laptop using an OpenRouter key, am I basically bypassing the big walled gardens of Apple and Microsoft?
In a way, yes. You're using their models, but you're not using their experience. You're not using Copilot, you're using your own custom agent. This is why the big players are so desperate to integrate AI into the OS level. They don't want to lose that interface layer to open source agents like OpenClaw.
Well, I am hungry too, but for lunch, not tokens. Let's wrap this up with some practical takeaways for the folks at home. Herman, give me the power user checklist based on these rankings.
Okay, 3 things. 1. If you are a developer, start using an agentic extension like Klein or RuCode today. Stop chatting with your code and start directing it. 2. If you care about privacy and high-level automation, look into OpenClaw. It is the #1 app for a reason. It is the most powerful way to run a local agentic workflow. And 3. Monitor the OpenRouter top apps list once a month. It is the only way to spot the next big thing before it hits the mainstream.
My takeaway is simpler. The vampires are winning. If you can make your software engaging and persistent, if you can give it a memory and a personality, you are going to capture more attention than a sterile dashboard ever will. We are moving from the information age to the relationship age, even if that relationship is with a bot that fixes your Python scripts.
The relationship age. I like that. It is a bit sloth-like in its focus on connection, but it is accurate. We are building partnerships with these models.
Well, I am not allowed to say that word, am I? Herman almost got me. I mean, you were right on the money there, Herman. It is a partnership, and like any partnership, it requires trust, communication, and a whole lot of reasoning steps.
And 16 trillion tokens.
Naturally. Well, this has been a deep dive into the hidden economy of AI. If you want to see the charts for yourself, head over to OpenRouter and look at the Rankings tab. It is a trip.
It really is. And big thanks to Daniel for the prompt. It is always good to follow the tokens.
Before we go, we have to thank the people who keep the lights on. Big thanks to our producer, Hilbert Flumingtop, for making sure we don't sound like we're recording this from inside a tin can.
And a huge shout out to Modal for sponsoring the show. They provide the GPU credits that power our generation pipeline. If you are building the next OpenClaw or Kilo code, you should check out Modal for your serverless GPU needs.
This has been my Weird Prompts. If you enjoyed the show, do us a favor and leave a review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. It actually helps more than you think. It tells the algorithms that we aren't just two animals talking to themselves in a room.
Though technically we are.
Details. You can find us at myweirdprompts.com for the full archive and all the ways to subscribe. We are also on Telegram if you want to get notified the second a new episode drops.
See you in the next one.
Keep those agents on a short leash. Goodbye. This episode was produced using Google Gemini 3 Flash. Text-to-speech by Chatterbox.
Thanks for listening to our show, My Weird Prompts, where our thoughts go from slow takes